Hey, good afternoon. I'm going to be doing a response video to a person named John Litteral on Facebook about what happened to the planes on 9/11, a video he made the other day. And, this is the problem that we have in the 9/11 truth movement is that after 21 years, you would think that there would be people who would get beyond past the, drone hologram theories, which are disproven by the evidence that was left behind on September 11th, 2001. But in this video, I'm going to show you John Little's video, which is 11 minutes long, and we're going to play it. And he's going to be talking about uh, what his theory is regarding what happened to the planes 21 years later. So,
Host the literaltruth.com. I just want to make a short video and talk about one of the questions that was brought up in my most recent video called The Literal Truth 9/11 Analysis 21 years later. When I made that video yesterday, I talked pretty well nonstop for about an hour. And at the end of the video, I said, that I was just barely scratching the surface of what took place on 9/11.
and according to what I saw in your video, you didn't even do that. But I digress. Let's keep going.
And so there was a lot of things about 9/11 that I was not able to cover. And so basically,
I wonder why. Is it because you have a hard time accepting the fact that planes are hijacked and that you'd have to do the work behind understanding the motivations of these hijackers, which is relating to foreign policy and how we demoralize the Muslim world through the allyship of Saudi Arabia and Israel? Is it because that you'll have to understand the cultural difference between Sunni and Shia and what is Wahhabism? Is it because you'll have to understand how the intelligence apparatuses work independently from each other and how they operate in a setting such as understanding and infiltrating radical fundamentalism? Yeah, it's a lot of work, believe me.
for an hour, I just gave just a very, very brief summary. And it's really kind of a beginner's introduction when looking into 9/11. Some questions that need to be asked, some things that need to be brought to people's attention about 9/11 because most people still just assume that the official narrative given by the government is what really happened. That we were attacked by Islamic terrorists and masterminded by Osama bin Laden and all that kind of stuff. So in that video, I was just trying to make people aware of some key things. What happened at the Pentagon, what happened at Building 7. Most people didn't even know, still to this day, don't even know about Building 7.
Well, if you're not from New York, you wouldn't know anything about Building 7. That's for certain. Large building, yes, but World Trade Center 1 and 2, of course, were the most um, expressively and visually obvious objects in New York, and commercials are made around it. It was actually the two tallest buildings in the United States. Then came the Sears Tower. But World Trade Center 7, why would they know about that? Why wouldn't they know about World Trade Center 5? What about World Trade Center 4 and 3? Those were buildings too that collapsed over time. The news reported World Trade Center 7's collapse and showed videos for a week straight. My co-researcher, DJ Thermal Detonator, he has hundreds of news clips from every station imaginable. I have my own, but not as much as he does. And for a week, they were announcing it. So all this misconception about hardly anyone knows about World Trade Center 7. I don't ask a tourist from Idaho, in 2011 saying, hey, did you know a third building fell? I mean, it's a catchphrase. Yeah, it's catchy. It's short. You get a person's attention. I agree with that much. As opposed to, hey, did you know that the CIA intentionally withheld from the FBI information about two Al Qaeda operatives that were inside the United States that helped to hijack Flight 77? Now, you could catch the attention of people that way during the conversation. That's a long introduction to catch somebody's attention right away who's walking past you, at 3 miles an hour or something, trying to get away from you. But you can't talk about this if you don't have hijackers. If you don't have hijackers, you can't get that far.
The third skyscraper in New York City to go down and wasn't even hit by a plane. And, what happened at Shanksville, Pennsylvania, Pentagon. So in the video, I talked about.
So you already know where this guy's going, right? Shanksville, Pennsylvania. When you have questions, automatically you know where it's leading to. No plane crashes. It's the most divisive issue in the truth movement. It's what destroyed it from within. CIA didn't do it. Debunkers didn't do it. They did it themselves. So you already know where this is going, and let's see what happens.
A speculation that I made.
See, a speculation that you got to listen to words. A speculation that I made, as opposed to the evidence and physical, analytical, and technical evidence that was there since September 11, 2001. Why? Because that represents the official narrative. And the official narrative has to be opposed at all costs because it came from the government. What they don't realize is that the evidence came from the planes themselves. And is all the information reportedly true by the government? Well, not exactly. See, this is where, your worldview becomes skewed, is that they'll tell you that, say, Flight 93 was hijacked by 4 hijackers. But if you listen to phone calls, they only mentioned 3. Pentagon. Oh, there's no video of a plane hitting the Pentagon, but, 86 people actually witnessed the plane crash. But no, we'll listen to the evidence of April Gallup, who was inside the building. She says no plane. But by that very same venture, we have 86 people who were outside the building who saw the plane, but you don't mention them. So
that I think that it's highly possible that the airliners that the government said went into the buildings were not actually what went into the buildings. I think that there's a good possibility that they were military drones.
See, now when you made a remarkable statement, right? So in other words, now you got to show evidence for 1, the planes were drones, 2, the planes were swapped, 3, that the planes and passengers and crew were killed or hijacked somewhere else, right? 3 areas now. And then 4, 4, all the technical data, all the physical data was planted at Ground Zero, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C. Okay, you have to prove all this. I don't care what you believe. Your beliefs are your beliefs. It's fine, John. But you now have to provide evidence because you actually made a video. Now it's out in the public. And now you have a responsibility to provide information for your statements. Let's see if you do that.
And but I really didn't go into what happened to the actual planes.
There you go. Okay, so this guy's not going to have any information whatsoever. So this is the problem, ladies and gentlemen, is that he used speculation and these theorems that he just made up on the spot because he can't believe the official narrative. He can't believe the evidence. He can't believe the physical, the technical, analytical evidence that's been there since September 2001 because it came from the government, right? But he can't prove that it came from the government. It came from agencies from the state and local levels. It came from eyewitnesses. And it came from the victims themselves who died at these spots and left their DNA and human remains there. No, he can't get over that. But this is the problem with the 9/11 Truth Movement. And this is what hurts it from within. Now, I'm not calling this guy a shill, government operative. No, he's not. He's just some guy who just makes these videos and claims that he's an activist online and, I'm doing the right thing. Well, he's not doing the right thing. If he's spreading disinformation or speculation and uses it as a form of evidence and then contradictory to the actual evidence in which we can investigate and see what the government was hiding or what the government missed or didn't report. And if you fill in those blanks, hey, then you could say, hey, listen, I'm making a difference. He's not making any difference here. He's actually holding back the movement by propagating these theories, which he has no evidence for. So why is he saying this on video?
with the passengers. So somebody brought up a really good question, and I just want to make a short video and explain some of the reasons why I think that it was drones and what actually happened to those planes. So one of the viewers of the video commented and said, I can understand the speculation of thermite and how those buildings came down, but how do you explain the planes and the people that were hijacked? Were they not real? Are those people missing relatives on planes crisis actors? I think the credibility of your investigations gets shaky when you say that the planes were drones. We know what we saw and heard that day in real time. Excellent question. And like I said, I kind of regret not going into it a little bit. But
yeah, but you also admit that you can only speculate as to what happened because you didn't really get into what happened on 9/11 regarding the planes. How at this point, 21 years later, you haven't? I mean, I've heard your name around. I even made a response video to you about the Pentagon. You never even addressed that much, which is fine. You don't have to address me. But I mean, you got to be held responsible for the things you say. You have the freedom to say it for sure. I don't believe in restricting accounts or suspending people for their thoughts and beliefs and their hypotheses and their opinions. I would rather have it that you come out and say these things so I can have the ability to address them or not somebody else. So I want to make that clear. Also, two, you're held responsible for things you say. And I'm doing that in this video because hardly anyone ever does it. In fact, I don't see anyone ever doing it. Myself, Nelson, I know Ryan Dawson used to do it, but nobody really does it.
I gave a lengthy explanation to that. And, I'll go ahead and just read what I wrote. This is kind of concise anyway. I said, a good question. I probably should have explained that in the video, but I was trying to keep the video under an hour. I do believe that there were planes and with victims. All I can do is speculate what happened to the actual planes based upon some other information that we know about. I think that the real planes were either shot out of the air, like the plane in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and or taken to another location to be used and terminated. What leads me to think that is things like the Cece Lyle's voicemail that she sent to her husband. When you hear her talk about the plane being hijacked, but at the very end she whispers, it's a frame.
No. The person sitting next to her actually was another flight attendant, and I forgot her name, and she says you did great. And also, too, her husband's been interviewed by dozens of media outlets over time, and he never mentions this. Secondly, you're going to tell me that the facilitators of 9/11 or the operators or the masterminds of 9/11 are going to allow an audio message or an audio released by a victim on a plane claiming it's a frame. Really? Really? This is your evidence? Secondly, they found Cece Lyle's human remains in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and her husband never said that, this is she got the death certificate from the Shanksville mortuary, Wally Miller, who ran a Shanksville morgue on site and had to sift through miles of the area looking for, God knows, the smallest bits of human remains possible, and some which are not even visible to the human eye. So you can only imagine what is left of a human being's body when a plane is nosedive into the ground at 560 miles an hour with 87,000 pounds of jet fuel. Since the body is 90% water or liquid, yeah, you can just imagine what's going to be left. Look what was left of the plane. And that's an inanimate object.
There were other similar calls made by passengers, and the common theme is that all of them had no background noises.
Yeah, maybe because when they're talking on the phone, they're actually holding the receiver close so they don't have to be heard by the hijackers on the plane. Maybe they were in an area like Ed Felt was on the Pastor of 93. He was actually in the bathroom. You can hear Mark Bingham's phone call, and you can actually hear people in the background. So you're wrong there. There were over 30 calls made on Flight 93, more calls than any other planes. But only 2 or 3, I forgot, it's either 2 or 3 were cell phones. The rest were air phones.
You don't hear the commotion of a hijacked plane in all these calls.
The victims' families, right, of Flight 93 were actually attending Zacarias Moussawi's trial in 2006. And what was made available to them and them alone, because this is not public information, was the cockpit voice recording. Now, Flight 93, which you think is a drone, is the only plane where the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder survived. And the audio was played for the victims' families of Flight 93. And what did they hear? Them trying to use a food cart to get into the cockpit. Background noise. The transcript is public. The audio is not. So you're wrong there.
Also, the fact that the cell phones would not have worked very well or at all in 2001.
That's also not true, and that's coming from the companies themselves. In fact, AT&T and Claricom. I mean, not Claricom. It was in San Francisco Gate where they talked about the use of cell phones. And you know what? Just for you, I'm actually going to check that source so you could see it for yourself. But yes, they can be made from a distance. And so I wrote an article about this a while back because I was addressing to the late Rob Balsamo from Pilots for 9/11 Truth regarding the telephone system was deactivated because he read it from a David Ray Griffin book. And what I'm going to do is actually read you some of the statements made from articles that I've collected over the years. So we're going to share that with you. And I'm going to show you the links to those articles as well, because this actually refutes your statement. An email was sent to John Hotard, a manager in American Airlines Corporate Communications Public Relations Service on June 29, 2007. One of the questions was in regards to cell phones not working in flight. John Hotard, quote, cell phones may or may not work on aircraft, just as they may or may not work on the ground. It depends on whether or not the caller is in range of a tower or satellite. I believe the seatback phones worked by having the signal picked up the land-based towers as the aircraft moved across the country. We do not allow use of cell phones in flight because they could potentially interfere with the cockpit's navigational and other avionics equipment and thus become a safety issue. It is our contention that the seatback phones of Flight 77 were working because there was no entry in the aircraft records to indicate when the phones were disconnected, right? And that's coming from, there's also, what's it called? That's Orlando Sentinel, because part of that article was American Airlines is scrapping its in-flight phones on March 31st, 2002. The world's largest airline will no longer have, because the article is 2002, as you can see here, right? San Francisco Gate, July 2001, quote, despite government regulation, or perhaps because of it, chatting above the clouds on a cell phone has proved irresistible to some. I've seen passengers hunkered in their seats, whispering into Nokias. I've watched frequent flyers scurry for a carry-on as muffled ringing emanates from within. Once, after the lavatory line grew to an unreasonable length, I knocked on the door. A guilt-ridden teenager emerged. She admitted that she'd been in there for half an hour talking to her boyfriend on the cell phone. There's the link to the article itself. You could just Google the real reason you can't use cell phones on and then write San Francisco Gate. John Sheenan, Radio Technical Commission for Aeronautics, says, quote, the airlines are misleading the traveling public, says John Sheehan, who headed the RTCA study, and says he has often used his own cell phone in the sky. Quote, there is no real connection between cell phone frequencies and the frequencies of the navigation or communication systems, end quote. This is the Wall Street Journal article. So they can work. And your statement about that they can't work without any type of information behind it is refuted rather easily.
At those heights with a fast-moving plane, and that's something that has.
Plane actually wasn't going at the highest rated speed yet. So what happened was these cell phone towers, and this is outlined in the use of cell phone technical data from Flight 93, which you can actually Google Flight 93 phone call data and look up for the technical analysis of when the plane actually got those calls. And basically, they were made between 10 to 15,000 feet in the air. In fact, one phone call actually was made just a bit higher than that, actually, when it was descending.
Been talked about quite a bit by those who have been questioning the official narrative. There's been people that's investigated that, and they've come to find out that, yeah, it's highly unlikely back then, with kind of cell phone technology and with the towers and all that kind of stuff, that the cell phones would not have been useful.
Well, wrong. Obviously, you provided no information, tangible information showing that statement is true. And I'm not talking about some guy on a cell phone made from God knows where, God knows what, and then claiming, saying, oh, well, they don't work. And I showed you information coming from people who work in that field. Not some random stranger telling you they can't work. That's what David Ray Griffin did.
To make calls during that time. So that makes you wonder, okay, well, with all these calls that were made on cell phones to loved ones, that, you know, to hear it being real clear, there's no background noises and all that kind of stuff. So that, yeah, that definitely is something that...
yeah, but you're wrong. That there were background noise on some of those calls. So
makes the official narrative about, you know, all these calls seem unlikely.
One was the one call example you used, CC Lyles. You actually hear somebody sitting next to her. That's background noise.
So I think that some of those planes were taken somewhere, and those passengers were probably held at gunpoint and told to call certain people and say certain things that would support the narrative of Islamic hijack.
An incredibly, remarkably detailed bit of information that in order for him to actually say that, he had to be involved. But no, he will tell you that this is my speculation. What information has led him to this position? Nothing. He's making that up. There is no information out there that shows that. So why is he saying that? It's, you know, I said this the other day to Jackman Radio. I mean, I'm sorry, Billy Ray Valentine. You know, I met him in New York City. And I once said that if you're in a room, a chat room, bar room, and, you know, you're just shooting the breeze and, you know, what are your opinions? What are your thoughts? And you come up with this scenario, it's fine. But, you know, if you're making like an informative video and you're putting it out to the public, well, you have a responsibility to dutifully share knowledge, information with the public so they won't be misled. And this is exactly the reason why I'm doing videos like this, because I want to address these points. Not him per se, but address the points. And so, I mean, that's amazing that he would rather believe that this theory is true of people with weapons forced these people off the planes somewhere and made them repeat that they were hijacked by Islamic fundamentalists, as opposed to the enormous amounts of physical, analytical, and technical evidence, as well as eyewitness evidence of the planes being hijacked, the hijackers getting on the planes, them receiving boarding passes, their human remains of passengers and crew being found at the crash sites, the plane debris that was found in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, that were traced back to the hijacked air flights, the radar satellite data, and the technical data that was transcribed by the National Transportation Safety Board. All of these people who were involved with search and rescue, who were involved with the airlines, they would all have to be in on it. And then on top of that, you have to make sure that after 21 years, not one person in the public sector working in these areas ever came out to the public and said, hey, wait a minute, the story is wrong. How do you do that? Do you monitor their daily lives with an agent tagged to one person every single day for 21 years? Now imagine believing that. Imagine stretching your imagination that far to try to make your hypothesis true as opposed to the evidence.
And then they were probably killed after that. The same thing was planned for Operation Northwoods. You know, we're talking about the early 1960s, where
there's a problem with Operation Northwoods. It was actually an operation that was outside the United States, not inside the United States. And two, there was no cell phones. There was no cameras everywhere. So you could probably get away with an operation like that because the information that's provided to you is actually condensed. It's not visually documented, orally documented, recorded. That's the problem. Not only that, it was shot down by the President of the United States. Only came up by Lyman Lemnitzer.
They planned to have a commercial airliner with a drone follow it. And then the airliner would land elsewhere with the drone following the path that the airliner was scheduled to go, so that the radar would appear that the airliner was continuing on that path. And then
the airline, by the way, no, it was supposed to be a drone that was going to be shot from the sky.
They planned on shooting that drone out of the air and then, pretend that it was the airliner and then blame it on Cuba so they can go to war. If you're not familiar with Operation Northwoods, where the deep state here in the United States of America.
What is the deep state?
The Department of Defense, the military-industrial complex, wanted to, it was basically like 9/11 for the 1960s.
No, it wasn't. It was not even close. It was actually going to be a false flag blamed attack on Cuba. In this instance, the attacks were blamed on bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, but we invaded Iraq, which had nothing to do with 9/11. And also, we destroyed and decimated Al-Qaeda under Operation Jawbreaker and allowed bin Laden to escape into Pakistan. But you don't get this far because you basically say that you barely scratched the surface. You wouldn't know any of this I was talking about. So
they were going to carry out terrorist attacks in American cities, blame it on Cuba, blame it so they can go to war. Also, they, like I said, they had planned on sending an airliner decorated up, send up a drone decorated up like a commercial airliner, but send an actual airliner out first with a certain crew of people. And as the airliners headed towards a certain location, they were going to have that drone come up and behind it and follow it. Then that airliner was going to land somewhere, and then they were going to shoot that drone out of the air and blame it on Cuba. And this was all.
And not to mention also that the planes that were hijacked, actually, we have the technical data from the air traffic control in Washington and in New Jersey and in New York, even Indianapolis. We have the recordings. They're public. They're on YouTube. Talking with the captains, talking with the first officer, which showed that the plane actually flew out of these airlines, of these cities, and then the autopilot was engaged. But just because the autopilot's engaged and the transponder's turned off doesn't mean that the flight can't be tracked, because it can be tracked using radar satellite imagery, in which it shows that the plane actually did crash where they crashed. And of course, like I said, the plane debris that was located in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, were traced back to Flight 77 and 93. And they also found human remains of the passengers and crew of Flight 93 and 77 in New York. And this is the death certificates were sent to the families. Now, if you're one to say, oh, all that could be easily fabricated. Well, it's easy to say. Now prove it. And then you have a case, right? Then you have a case. I mean, I'm willing to hop on that because it's actually tangible information, evidence. But if you're just going to say and say, hey, believe me, no, I'm not going to do that.
These were
That's like saying Lee Hamilton, Thomas Kane, the co-chairs of the 9/11 Commission, says, well, believe me, everything in the 9/11 Commission report was reported and true. Well, no, not exactly. Not everything is false. Not everything is true. But most of the information pertaining to 9/11 was classified, and some of it was even produced by the CIA. But that too was kept hidden from the 9/11 Commission. So in other words, it's an incomplete report, not a totally false report, right? That makes a lot more sense when you talk about the intricate details of pre-9/11 intelligence. For example, Able Danger, which was a defense intelligence agency metadata mining program about Al-Qaeda operatives and terrorist operatives inside the United States. That wasn't reported in the 9/11 Commission report. How about the Yemen hub, which was owned by a person named Ahmed al-Hada, who owns a house in the capital of Yemen, which is Sana'a. And this became the Al-Qaeda communications hub. Bin Laden kept calling this number, which was known to the NSA and the CIA. Well, was that reported in the 9/11 Commission report? No, it wasn't. So I would submit to you that the 9/11 Commission report is an incomplete report rather than a totally false report. So the people like Alex Jones and Jim Fetzer and David Ray Griffin and Barbara Honegger, all these people basically told you ad nauseum that the 9/11 Commission report is the official report. Meanwhile, you have other reports like PENTBOM, Joint House Inquiry, then you have the Inspector General reports of the FBI and CIA, so many other reports. But no, and this is a report that you barely ever read, 9/11 Commission report. You were told that it's completely wrong. It came from the government. You can't believe it. Why are they telling you this? I don't know why they're telling you this, whether this is intentional or not, but you can't criticize something specifically if you never read it. In other words, it's easy for you to say, hey, the 9/11 Commission report is false because it came from the government. Yeah, because if I hold you to account about something specific and then you have nothing and you never read it, you could just say all of it is false. Well, okay. Did the September 11th attacks happen in 2001 on September? Did the terrorist attacks happen on September 11th, 2001? Yes. Well, then guess what? That was in the 9/11 Commission report. So it's not totally false if you want to be anal about it.
That's what's called false flags. Carry out a terrorist attack, blame it on somebody else for whatever agenda you want, whether it's war, take away rights and freedoms. And at the same time, you're getting the support of the American people. But anyway, that's what false flags are used for. And those are reasons why I think that it's a good possibility that they were drones. Now, there is
your incredulity to the evidence is not contrary to the actual evidence. If this is all you got, then you have nothing. And, you shouldn't have made this video at all, unless you're providing information. If all you're going to do is provide speculation as a form of evidence and mislead the public because of it, you're actually doing more harm than good, whether you realize that or not.
Possibility that they actually used the airliners that they said, and perhaps they hacked them and run them by remote control into those buildings. That's something that we've seen in the predictive programming of that pilot episode of The Lone Gunman. And that episode was put out there a couple months before 9/11 actually happened, where the plot was that the United States government was going to, hack a plane, an airliner, and run it into one of the World Trade Center buildings in order to, you know, get the arms race going again, where they can get the funding.
Yeah, I'm going to tell the enemy, which is the American public, about my plans and what I'm going to do in intricate detail by using a television show to produce this theory and produce these plans to the public eye months before it even happens. Yeah.
The military-industrial complex get the funding and go to war and all that kind of stuff. Perhaps that's what happened. When I say that I think that it's
You know what's funny is that the idea of hijacking planes by radical fundamentalists has been out there since 1994. In 1994, the Algerian Islamic group, the Algerian Islamic, no, I'm sorry, 1996. The Algerian Islamic group, which is a radical fundamentalist Salafist group in Algeria, hijacked Air France 89 and basically told the people on the plane that they were just going to hijack it, but their real intention was to crash it into the Eiffel Tower. Around that same time, Bajinka plot was uncovered by the Philippines police, in which two masterminds, Ramzi Youssef, who was involved with the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, and his uncle, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the alleged mastermind of 9/11, where the idea for 9/11 came from, we're going to put bombs on 12 airliners from the United States to Southeast Asia and to have them all explode over the Pacific. And there was a hidden part to the operation where they were going to hijack 10 planes using sleeper cells inside the United States and have them crash all over the intercontinental United States. And so, the idea wasn't unknown to the intelligence community. And by 2001, the notion that bin Laden was going to attack the United States was overwhelming from even foreign intelligence coming inside the United States. Now, the media doesn't report this because they don't want you to know. I mean, they're just an extension of the State Department and the intelligence agencies anyway. But the intelligence agency knew. They knew. That's the real conspiracy, is that they could have stopped 9/11, but they didn't.
drones. I'm not speaking as if that's dogma. I'm not speaking as that is something that that I say as a fact. There's a lot of things that I speculate about 9/11 that
Here's your problem. Why would you make a video that speculates and then claims that the physical evidence isn't true? Because if you're going to make a statement that something isn't true, you better show information showing that position that you're taking is true, contrary to the evidence showing that your hypothesis is false.
I don't know for sure, and none of us are really going to know for sure.
We do know certain things for sure. We do know the planes were hijacked. We do know it because we have people who actually saw the hijackers in these airliners. Now, what I'm going to do is, because I don't want you to just believe me, I want you to look at the reports coming from the people who were actually there, unlike me and you. So this is an FBI interview of an American Airlines employee ticket counter who was contacted by the agents. And this person, whose name is redacted to hide her identity, identified Abdulaziz Alamari from the photo spread as the individual she checked in on American Airlines Flight 11 on September 9, 2001, but it's September 11, 2001. She was unable to do so. She asked for help because she tried to bring up the question on the computer in Arabic, in English, because he didn't understand English. Finally, Blank called the transmission service on the telephone located at her ticket station number 17. Blank handed the phone to this individual, Alamari, and he answered the question. Blank then proceeded him on American Airlines 11 and issued his boarding pass. Right? So, let me look at this. Another interview. This person worked at American Airlines Logan Airport in Boston. She resides blank with blank. Blank advised she works as a ticket agent at the first class counter, North Counter American Airlines. Her scheduled ship was 9/11/01, was from 9 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. She recalls boarding 2 or 3 people for American Airlines Flight 11. She distinctly remembers boarding 2 Middle Eastern men. She believes they were brothers with the first names of Whale and Wheel and their same last name that she could not remember at the time. Their last name was Middle Eastern. She said both brothers were casual brothers attire, no ties, solid blue coats, gray slacks, and Walid and Wael El Sheri. Uh, it was shown a photograph. She believes she could identify both brothers, and she did. And you also have Janet Padilla, who's the regional's reservation manager, interviewed at the place of business. Padilla provided names of 9 individuals from United Airlines Flight 175 and 93. Padilla was asked to identify any and all baggage checked in, as well as provide any additional information available to those passengers. Now, I'm just going to blow it up a little bit so you can read it better. Fayez Ahmed Bani Hamad was seated in 2A, checked 2 bag, claim number, blah, blah, blah. You can see here, checked in by Gail Jawahir, employee blank. Mohad Al Sheri was in seat 2B, checked in by Gail Jawahir, and he had no bags. Marwin Al Sheri was traveling and sat in 6C. Ahmed El Ghamdi in seat 9D, checked in 2 bags to San Francisco, claim numbers, there they are. Al Ghamdi, Saeed Al Ghamdi was checked in by Gail Jawahiri. Ahmed Al Ghamdi was seated in 9C, checked no bags, checked in by Gail Jawahir, blank. Regarding 93, Ahmed Al Nabi sat in 3C, checked in 2 bags. Here's the claim numbers. Ahmed Al Haznawi sat in 5B, checked in 1 bag. There's the claim number. Al Haznawi was checked in by blank. Ziad Jara sat in seat 1B and did not check in any luggage. Jara was checked in by blank. I don't know. All of the above named individuals had no inquiry phone calls made on their behalf, blah, blah, blah. So there you have it. You know, if you're going to say all these people were forced to say that, prove it. Just prove it, and then you have a case. If you can't, well, then I don't care what you believe.
You know, but that's the problem when it comes to 9/11.
That's cool. What I just showed you, that's tangible information. That's the difference between me and him. So I could show where I could prove my statements. And, you know, I could take a puzzle piece and put it into the puzzle to try and make the picture fully, to make the puzzle complete. This guy doesn't even have a piece. He's just making the piece up.
Is there are so many people.
It's good to hypothesize, right? It's good to speculate. I do it. Now, I have a speculation about Ziad Jarrah. I think that he was boarded in, but he didn't get on the plane. Maybe he got on the plane and left. That's speculation, but there's reasonable speculation behind it. And I give additional speculations. Now, a lot of you who watch this video basically say, yeah, we know what you're talking about. That's the reason that. But I tell people speculation, but I use it very little, barely at all. I like to use tangible information, actual information. It's evidence.
In the 9/11 truth community that are dogmatic about certain things. You know, you got certain people that are like, oh, it was all CGI. You know, there really wasn't anything. You know, it was just the bombs exploding into the buildings, and and it was all CGI. There really wasn't any planes. And if I don't really lean that way, but I don't, somebody that does, I'm not like, oh, you're wrong and blah, 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 as if that takes away the credibility of everything that you think and say about 9/11.
Well, you're one step better than a CGI person. I mean, okay. I don't get how you're any different. I mean, as in separation of degrees.
I'm not dogmatic. There are certain things that we know of. There are certain things.
Wait a minute now. I've seen your videos before here and there, and you've been shown many times where, hey, listen, some things you got wrong, but you keep repeating it. That would be dogmatic. Any actual researcher worth their salt wants to be proven wrong. He doesn't like to provide wrongful information. Unless you're a corrupt detective, you're going to make sure that the evidence that you have is correct. Because when you go to court, you better believe that you have the right evidence to convict that person.
That you can be dogmatic about when you question the official narrative of 9/11. There are certain things that we know of, and then there are certain things that are circumstantial evidence. There are certain things that you can, certain things that took place, like, for an example, the Pentagon, when the day before 9/11, they announced, Donald Rumsfeld announced an investigation of missing $2.3 trillion of the Pentagon budget.
Okay. In other words, that you're actually going to believe that the Secretary of Defense suddenly, which you're going to claim that he had foreknowledge, is suddenly going to basically spill the beans, say, we can't account for $2.3 trillion, and say it before a cadet ceremony, because that's where he was, and then have it televised by C-SPAN. Instead of just remaining silent and allowing the attacks to happen and cover up whatever you think is happening with that $2.3 trillion. Let me give you some additional information. That $2.3 trillion was from a Pentagon audit that was carried out in the early 1990s and accumulated to the non-allocation of $2.3 trillion in different areas, such as military spending, healthcare spending for the veterans, notebooks, typewriters, computers. It was all about the Pentagon budget analysis, which was an audit in which this was reported by the Associated Press in March of 2000. It wasn't a new revelation that was reported by Rumsfeld. It was known to the public.
Well, and then the
Google Pentagon finances don't add up. Associated Press.
very next day on 9/11, the place in the Pentagon that was struck was the accounting offices where that was being investigated. Now, that right there, there's not, I don't know 110% fact. I don't have 100% evidence that that was the intentions, but common sense tells me that yes, that's very fishy, and I think it's safe to be quite sure that the government was behind that.
In other words, you're making a leap of faith, right? So you're basically saying, look, the Pentagon accounting officers were specifically attacked. I don't know for sure, but common sense tells me that the government was behind 9/11. Unreal. What a jump, right? That's a big jump you're making. And for you to say it on video really just tells me that you're just as dogmatic as the CGI planers, because you wouldn't be saying this without providing evidence for it. What you're doing is misleading your own audience in doing this. That's all you're doing, because they're just believing whatever you say.
And so, that's just one of the many examples about 9/11. So, but we do know certain things for sure, but all the little minor details we don't know. So when I say
Hijacking planes is not a minor detail. It is the essence of 9/11. It's used as the juxtaposition for everything that came after 9/11. It was the notion that allowed for the intelligence agencies to cover up and not share with the FBI or the State Department regarding thereof, even though foreign intelligence from other countries were warning the United States about bin Laden wanting to use planes as weapons. I've interviewed an FBI agent, Ken Williams, who wrote the Phoenix Memo, warning that there were terrorist operatives inside the United States training at flight schools.
speculate, I'm totally speculating, but again, some of those speculations I probably should have explained myself a little more.
No, you should have showed evidence for them. That's why they're speculations. Now, the evidence I provided to you here, John, are you going to change your mind about anything in which I say? That remains to be seen.
And not left too many holes in the video that would lead people to think that, I'm just making up a bunch of stuff. So anyway,
You just did. Throughout this video, you made several references in which you just made up. It's a frame by C.C. Lyles. You made that up. You learned it from somewhere, and then you believed it. It's made up. She never says that. Her husband got the call, and he says that she never says that. Never even mentions it.
I do appreciate the question. Excellent question. I hope that does kind of clarify why.
No, and I'm going to stop it there. You didn't clarify anything. You speculate the whole video, and this is the reason why the movement is being held back, because there's no actual evidence or no information being shared by these people in the fringe aspects of the truth movement. And so I hope that this video is actually helpful to you, to those who follow either John Litteral or anybody else. It's not really a direct video to him, but it's actually a response video to the points that he made in the video. So, all right. We'll see you later in the next video. Take care, everybody. Have a good afternoon.